let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that is the quarterback. They lost TJ Finley, but they bring in the Sun Belt Player of the Year in Jordan McLeod. How did Jordan McLeod look in the spring?
He looked really good. I'll tell you that right now, Justice. It's a spring practice, right? So you're not going to get to see their best of the best type of stuff. But he struggled early. You could tell that he kind of got more in a groove. And I thought that he looked pretty good by the end of it.
Yeah, there's a big debate between me and Zimmel, too, whether or not he's 6 feet tall or not. Jury's still out, I think.
Listed at 6 foot. I said until I see him in the deep end of the pool, I don't believe it. I'm saying that's 5'11".
Yeah, I would agree with both you guys. He's not 6 foot. Was he there? His commitment was like a little bit late, but was he there for all of spring practice, or did he kind of come in like the middle? Or
he was there for the last 8 or 9 weeks. It was like a special academic. Apparently, our compliance people are the best in the business, and so they knew every single rule to get him over pretty quick. Is the story that GJ Kinney tells. So that was kind of sick. Yeah,
behind the scenes,
doing some sort of master's program in that way.
Behind the scenes, it sounds like he was shopping himself around to some bigger programs. Nobody was biting. Texas State had a really bad slip through the cracks, we'll call it, with a quarterback situation. And it just ended up being a perfect situation with Finley leaving and McLeod coming in.
All right. So this is a guy that I'm personally super excited for. I was actually a little disappointed when McLeod came because I wanted to see PJ Hatter. But how has his development been coming along, and what do you think the future holds for him?
Yeah, that dude's awesome. Yeah, me and Zimmel think the world of PJ Hatter. He had a touchdown that was like called back last year too. I think it was during the Jackson State game. It might have been Nevada though. But he had like a running touchdown, and I was like, "Hey, look at this! Look what we can do!" And he fits like what GJ Kinney wants to do with the ball in his hand too. So that's why we think the world of him too. He's also like one of the best players to come out of Houston too, if I remember correctly.
He's more of a GJ Kinney type of quarterback in that he kind of reminds us of the way that GJ played when he was in college. If you look at the depth charts right now online, first off, nobody knows anything. But second, like, because, the summer transfer portal is still going to come.
No, our fans know everything, Zoom.
Well, yeah, that's right. They tell us all the time how right they are. But right now, RJ Martinez is listed as QB number 2. I would kind of be surprised to see PJ Hatter not being in that QB2 position come week 1. But again, Jacob and I were joking about this off air. We were talking about how we didn't think that TJ Finley would be QB1 going into the Baylor game. And then, hey, turns out he was our guy the entire season.
Literally all the way up until the first snap. We were like, there's no way this guy gets the start.
The only thing
and in hindsight, that was the dumbest thing
McLeod's going to be QB1. That's really the only thing that you can pretty much write him with a pen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would expect Hatter would be QB. I mean, Martinez is just got there, right?
Yeah, he just got there.
It's one of those just got there, but it's like by the time week 1 rolls around, he'll have had the playbook. He will have been in communication with a lot of the players on the team. And the crazy thing about the Leftwich GJ Kinney kind of offensive system, it's not that complex. It's not like they're running, Latin and everybody else is speaking pig Latin. It kind of makes sense in a lot of ways. The passing schemes. So I don't think it's the hardest thing to pick up. Again, I just think PJ Hatter's been in the building. I would be surprised if he's not QB2.
Also, if we're talking about time in the room specifically, Brad Jackson's been there for the entire spring semester. Like, he was there the entire time because he was like a grayish or whatever you call that specific transfer.
Early enrollee.
Yeah, he early enrolled at Texas State and then even went to prom and then came back. And then, so he's been living like a double life basically up until the summer.
Well, moving on to the running game. Ishmael Mahdi was the last was the man last year and ran wild for 1,331 yards and 10 touchdowns. With the transfers they brought in, how did that room look in the spring?
It's going to look really good. We were joking again. I know you guys are big Ish Mahdi fans, but Lincoln Perry, he dealt with an injury last year. He was going to be running back 1 before that injury. Ishmael Mahdi was a diamond in the rough for this program. He comes back, and he's probably going to be the number 1 guy, but it's going to be running back by committee, which I am completely fine with. If you're a fantasy football player, you want one running back. If you're a fan of a football team, you want a committee so that everybody gets the touches equally and nobody's getting beat up when it comes to bowl season time, because I know we're going to get to it, what the expectations are for Texas State. They're very lofty this year.
Yeah, I think everybody was super excited for Lincoln last year, and then he tore his ACL like around this time last year, and it was like the worst thing like to happen. Me and Zimmel were both like, "Is this horrible?" Like, this is even before they announced TJ Finley signing. So in a lot of ways, it felt like the end was already here this time last year.
So you mentioned maybe thinking about a running back by committee. What kind of split is that? Is that 50-50, 60-40? What's your thoughts?
I think it's going to be 33 across the board. I think that they use 3 running backs this year with Lincoln, with Ish, and then, they've got transfers in there, Jalen Jenkins. They've got a bunch of guys. Look, Texas State has been known to whatever rises to the top is what they're going to play with. Mm-hmm. There might be a guy that we're not even thinking about right now who, come week 1, Leftwich and Kenny have looked at and said, like, all right, well, what if we give this guy a touch? He has a big game against Arizona State. Then the next thing you know, we're not even we're going to continue to talk about Ishmati, but he might not be even running back 1 come front of mind in week 6. That's just how college football is now. With the transfers coming in and out, somebody might be a lot better, and we don't even know who they are yet.
Yeah, I think Jalen had a lot of touches in the spring, mostly because Ish had the stomach flu or he was sick. And so we saw him. He was not suited out or anything. Same way with a lot of guys, actually. Cole Wilson was out in the spring. Ben Bell was out in the spring. And then right after the spring was actually the first time we had heard from the team post. I don't know if we want to talk about it really, but the Jaden Dolores situation too. So that it was a kind of a weird vibe in the spring. So my mind was a little elsewhere instead of like watching exactly who was taking every single snap on the field, honestly.
Moving back to that passing game, they returned 2 of their top 3 receivers and all Sun Belt second teamer Joey Hobart and Cole Wilson. But they did lose Ashton Hawkins, who transferred to Baylor. How did the receivers look in the spring? I know you mentioned Cole Wilson was out, but how did Hobart look, and did any other receivers kind of stand out for you?
This is our favorite topic on this podcast is Ashton Hawkins, so I'm glad you asked. Because Ashton was one of my boys. That's like my ride or die on last year's team. And I was just like, he just needs more time, buddy. He just needs more time. Zimmel thought the opposite up until last week, actually, when somebody brought this up, too.
So, okay, Hawkins wasn't that good last year. He had a couple of good games. He had a drop, awful drops all throughout the year. And so I was like, yeah, he kind of stinks now. I don't know what to tell you. And now all of a sudden he's at Baylor and people pretend that he's a bum. I'm like, he wasn't a bum. He just had a bad case of the drops. To answer your question, Joey Hobart was the most underrated group of 5 receiver last year. Nobody knew who this guy was. Nobody cared who this guy was until he showed up in that Baylor game. And then from there on out, until then, or since then, he has been one of the guys that people really care about and people keep their eyes on. I don't think that he's going to be wide receiver 1 this year. I think it's going to be Cole Wilson. I think Hobart is in the short game more often than Wilson will be. McLeod, when he was at JMU, he wasn't the type of guy who wanted to take the top off the defense. It's going to be interesting to see how these receivers work when it talks about getting separation, especially in the middle of the field. And we didn't get to see a ton of that in the spring game. That's something I'm having an eye out for.
I brought this guy up last week. I think Drew Donnelly is going to have a breakout season. He was supposed to last year. If you look at all the highlights and all like what the team was like alluding to, he was like the fastest player on the team last year and all this stuff. Like all this like June and July sports content, basically. Drew Donnelly dominated everything. And I think he finished with less than 100 yards or something like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know. The production was not there, obviously. This is my X factor. Yeah, Drew Donnelly. And then obviously we love Cole Wilson. We've had him on the show. He's awesome. And then Bo Sparks out of Utah Tech too. Same spot that Joey Hobart played out of. Wouldn't that be something if he was something too?
Yeah, he was a FCS All-American in 2023. Comes from Utah Tech, where you got Joey Hobart. What kind of role do you see for him in here coming in 2024? Think he's part of the rotation?
We have like 12 listed wide receivers right now. We went through all of these last week too on our show. I don't know exactly. I mean, we play like these wide splits too, so you would think we're gonna see a bunch of different wide receiver sets and things come out. We ran like a ton of stuff, and also, I mean, people thought we were going to be like a huge tight end heavy team last year too. That didn't happen either. So I don't know. This team's kind of a wild card.
And look, you talk about the running back room. They might roll out week 1 and be like, we're not throwing the ball. We're just going to be a running team. And we have all this incredible wide receiver talent.
We are the San Francisco 49ers.
You really don't know what GJ Kenny is thinking about. I will say the only thing that I think Texas State fans don't want to see is tunnel screens or screen passes in any capacity. If we just take the screen pass out of the playbook, I think Texas State fans would be more than excited about that.
One of your transfers that I was in particular kind of excited for because I thought he looked good at times at Boston College is Jaden Williams. What can you guys tell us about him? Maybe how he looked in the spring, and can we expect him to be part of that offense? Because he's another guy I feel like has speed and can take the top off of defense.
Well, like I said, with McLeod, I don't know how much top off the defense they're going to want to do. If we went pound for pound against McLeod versus TJ Finley, I thought TJ Finley should have been the Sun Belt Player of the Year last year with the way that he played the quarterback position. I don't know how much it's going to matter when it comes to straight line speed down the field. It's going to come down to, can these guys get separation in the short game? Can these guys get separation to the sideline? If he can do that, then by all means, he might be the wide receiver 1 by, again, like week 4 or 5. But we will not know what this team really looks like. Arizona State's going to be a really good test early. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, rival UTSA. Those are kind of the 2 early season benchmarks for what this team looks like.
One of the last signees that was announced to Jalen Griffin at a UCF, 6'3", huge frame. That's like my prototypical wide receiver, especially for what we run. I think honestly he has the opportunity to be huge. We'll see what happens, I guess.
So it kind of sounds like we got Joey Hobart, Cole Wilson, and then that number 3 guy is kind of still to be determined in fall camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Well, Texas State returns tight end Connor Fox, Titus Lyons, and they also brought in Blake Smith from Oklahoma. If you were to describe the tight end usage for this offense to somebody who's never caught a game, how would you describe it?
Get ready to learn blocking because that's kind of what it is. They did not use the tight end as much as if you look at other iterations of the Texas State offense. And look, GJ Kenny is a far, I think, more sophisticated play caller than what Spavital was at Texas State, the previous head coach. Spavital liked the tight end, didn't love the tight end. Withers, that would be now 2 coaching cycles ago, loved the tight end. And since then, it's been pretty much a steady diet of fewer and fewer targets towards tight ends. So if you're coming to Texas State, get ready to learn how to block, because that would be the number 1 thing, I think, Jake.
Yeah, the last tight end that truly affected the game was Keenan Brown. And he was also the last, anything of ours that was this dude could be like a Sunday afternoon type player. And when Keenan Brown was on the team, he was literally the only person that could move the ball at all. Somebody I'm really huge on is Jake Simpson. He was a true freshman last year. I think he's got everything that we need in a tight end. I was huge on Connor Fox last year too. Then he got hurt. Basically didn't play pretty much the entire year. I think he played the Rice Bowl. I don't know. It felt like we didn't have tight ends, honestly. Titus Lyons was one of those really cool, feel good stories. A walk-on gets signed onto the team. And he's had some really cool moments with the team also. But really it's
just none of them are in between the lines. Cool moments with the team, just none of them in between the lines.
Yeah.
So moving on to the offensive line, they graduated senior Caleb Johnson and right guard Bray Walker, but they were able to bring back right tackle Jameto Obigbo, Dorian Stewart at left guard, and Trenton Scott at left tackle. How did they address the losses of Johnson and Walker here in the spring?
I would say it's more of a chemistry thing than anything else. When you talk about the loss of players to graduation to everything else, a lot of those offensive linemen came with GJ from Incarnate Word. So it wasn't like these 5 guys are having to learn chemistry. There's 5 guys are trying to learn a blocking scheme. They pretty much were doing it at Incarnate Word, going to the playoffs and playing just a game away from the national championship a season earlier. When you lose those type of mechanism, when you lose those type of pieces, I think for most Texas State fans, it kind of goes over your head. You don't really care. I think for the people who are watching week in and week out, they know that the offensive line is going to be really big because the passing game doesn't work, the running game doesn't work. None of this offense works without an offensive line.
Yeah, and that was really the secret sauce for GJ and company last year, is just that UIW like chemistry, even like off the field stuff. Like it helped a ton that was basically the entire coaching staff poured it over. You know, you went from NCAA 14, your best team ever, and then you ported it over to NCAA 25 into the modern era, and you were able to just, you know, open up a can of whoop-ah, as Bobby Boucher would say. And then in the spring, I think we signed like 4 offensive line guys. Kind of shore that up. We got some of like Deion Sanders' former Louis bag luggage. Yeah. So, you know, it's fun.
And I would want to add on that the chemistry point. Lindsey Scott Jr. was an offensive analyst last year for him.
Still actually listed.
Still listed as a coach. And it helps if your guy who was your quarterback a year prior is now on the coaching staff telling you, hey, trust the system, trust the guys around you. That helps a lot. And, you know, it helps that he's still on the roster.
Also a friend of the show. Shout out Lindsey Scott Jr.
GJ Kinney turned him into a star. And I don't, you know, that certainly shouldn't go unnoticed.
That dude's so smart. He was like an electrical engineering major or something like in engineering. It's just like the way that he was able to do that at 6 different schools while also having a bunch of success too is nuts to me.
So if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be? Do you guys have one that you can agree on, or do you each have your own?
I don't think Jacob and I could agree on anything. You could say what color is the sky, and we would argue.
Not even politics. Zimmel's way one way, you know?
I would say Lincoln Perry. I think of all the guys coming off the ACL injury, I think that he's the type of guy that has a breakout season. You know the other names. You know McLeod. You know Ishmati. You know Joey Hobart. This is a guy that when Texas State is winning the Sun Belt this year, it's going to be in large part because of him in the backfield.
Yeah, I really would like to say a tight end, like, you know, the way that we kind of talked about it. But it's just like I don't see the usage at all. Even now, like in practice, like those guys don't get first looks in the progressions or anything like that. I'm a big Jake Simpson guy, though, so I'll say Jake Simpson. But it'll probably be Connor Fox who gets the starting look.
Bobcats!